I'm going to start with you because the Post-its in your background, which if you have been following Kristin Graham for as long as I have, you should know that she loves herself a Post-it, especially the colorful ones. And I kind of like how the colors match the different colors on the book we're going to be talking about today. I don't know if you planned that or not, but it seems it is aesthetically very pleasing to me. Which when we're talking about events, I also like those to be aesthetically pleasing, to be clear. And Dele, I will give a nod to your library because you have organized your books to be color coordinated, which is amazing. I also color coordinate my books and put them in their groups of blues and reds and whites and whatnot.
It goes against my library science background of the Dewey Decimal System.
Just can't catalog that way.
Because you know I'm all about the looks, no numbers.
Wow.
I just made that up on the fly.
Well done.
This is what happens at the fun table. We just can't help ourselves from having fun.
Welcome to Beats Working, Winning the Game of Events, where we share stories and strategies to turn any event or life moment into something unforgettable.
Events are wild, and the people who work in them are some of the most resilient humans on Earth. If you know, you know.
So come with us behind the curtain for a look at their most memorable experiences.
As they say, the show must go on, so let's get on with the show.
Welcome to another episode of Beats Working, Winning the Game of Events. My name is Alysse Bryson, and I am one of the co-hosts here, alongside my work wife for life, my ride or die, Libby Sundgren.
Hello.
Hello. And we are in episode 2 of the Fun Table. This is where we get together once a month with our favorite party people, and we circle around our virtual fun table. And we talk about all things events and how we are winning the game of events. In the last episode, we talked about the book, The Art of Gathering, and that was a great conversation. If you missed that episode, I highly recommend you go back and give it a listen. While you're there, go ahead and give it a 5-star rating too. Thanks. And today we are talking about the book, Supercommunicators by Charles Duhigg? I should know how to pronounce these things. Duhigg? All right, here's the main idea of the book. Charles explores the art and science of effective communication, emphasizing the understanding, the type of conversation, practical, emotional, social, and aligning our approach accordingly can transform interactions into meaningful connections. Why does that matter if you're in the events industry? Because the whole points of events are making connections, right? And today we are welcoming back our party ride or dies. We have Kristin, Dele, and Amy, who had joined us in the last episode. Hello, ladies. Welcome back.
Hello, friends.
Hello. And we're going to have another deep dive talking about books. Now, I hope for our listeners, you know, we're not always going to talk about books. I mean, some of us are self-proclaimed book nerds, to be honest, and we do like to have our little events libraries at home as we continue to curate kind of what we think are best practices around events. And when we say events, we're talking about events of all sizes. It could be like at Amy Liz Harrison's house where she's just having dinner, but because she has 10 people in her family, that is definitely an event. Or we could be talking about Kristin taking the stage and doing a speech to hundreds, if not thousands, of employees at some major brand or corporation. So events scale all sizes, but at the root of them is connection. That's why we gather. And so let's just jump into it today, unless anybody else has any burning desire or hot topic that I failed to miss. No?
Let's go.
All right, Kristin, I'm going to start with you because the Post-its in your background, which if you have been following Kristin Graham for as long as I have, you should know that she loves herself a Post-it, especially the colorful ones. And I kind of like how the colors match the different colors on the book we're going to be talking about today. I don't know if you planned that or not, but it seems it is aesthetically very pleasing to me, which when we're talking about events, I also like those to be aesthetically pleasing, to be clear. And Dele, I will give a nod to your library because you have organized your books to be color coordinated, which is amazing. I also color coordinate my books and put them in their groups of blues and reds and whites and whatnot.
It goes against my library science background of the Dewey Decimal System.
Just can't catalog that way.
Because I'm all about the looks, no numbers.
Wow.
I just made that up on the fly.
Well done.
This is what happens. This is what happens at the fun table. We just can't help ourselves from having fun. Okay, Kristin.
Yes.
Over to you and your colorful Post-its.
Well, thank you very much. And I'd love to take strategic credit for it, but it's really just so I don't forget stuff. Let's just be honest. So that's kind of life. The fact that it's colorful and distracts people is just a gift with purchase. So I love this topic because I have done communications for a living, and yet there's so much there that all of us can still learn, especially in a post-COVID world. So that's one of the elements that I really enjoyed with this book. But from a background perspective, the quick summary that I took from it was that being a super communicator is really about being a super listener. And so for all the people in my life who keep saying like, but I'm not a communicator. Of course we are. From the very early evolutionary phases and the cave drawings and everything else, we are biologically wired to tell stories. So don't keep taking that skill off the table for you, as a lot of us tend to do. It's such an important part of connection, and anybody in the events business or the gatherings, that the intimacies from small weddings to huge things, it is all about the details, as we know, and the details are shared through communication, whether it's visual, audio, all of it. So we are all capable of being super communicators. So I just want to put that as a first framing. Can I get an amen?
Amen, sister.
Amen.
Good.
Here for it.
Or whatever spiritual exclamation of your choice is. Because we should be.
That was very inclusive of you.
Thank you. And I mean it. So within that, I really, really love how he talks in this book about how some people, he did a lot of research, but also around what makes people stand out. And it's not a socioeconomic element, and it's not a title in an academic or corporate setting. It really becomes about, and we've all been in those situations where it's sometimes we've been that person. People just kind of follow a voice. He gave examples of a juror room during courtroom deliberations, but there's a lot of other cases where, you ever been with a group of people, nobody can decide on dinner or an activity, and somebody's finally like, this is what we're doing. And it's not even a hierarchy. It really just comes down from somebody who is listening or willing to step forward and bring together the communication. So I just want to reflect on that before we get into some of the examples. What else would the rest of you add before I nerd up on other topics?
I feel like when I read this, I was like, of course, there are these three different types of conversations. Of course, people communicate differently, but I just don't know that I've ever read it in this way or heard it in this way. And actually, it made me feel a lot better about myself because
Snaps for Libby feeling good about herself.
Feeling good about herself because I am kind of an emotional person. I mean, I'm kind of sensitive. I cried when people said no to buying my campfire candy, which is why I was never good at selling it, because I just could not have people say no. It just crushed my little soul. I do approach almost every conversation from an emotional place, just because that's how my brain is wired and how I am. And I feel like if someone had explained this to me in these words 20 years ago, I would have taken so many more things less personally, even if they told me, 30 years ago when I was 10. But like, it really helped frame just, memories and people in my life in different ways. Yeah. Where I could just be like, you know what? Of course, that I cried in that conversation because I'm emotional, but they're coming from like a logical, like practical place. So, and that's how they communicate. So I just thought it was really, really helpful. So that's my 2 cents.
So, Libby, I would say word on all that. I totally identified with what you just shared. I too could not sell the chocolate. So, guess what happened? I ate all the chocolate. That's what happened there for me.
We bought it and we ate it. Okay.
I
Those mint
know.
meltaways were so good. I
So
wish I could get
good,
some.
right? Okay, so for me, I first started reading this, and I have to confess, so I was a communication theory major in college, and I was like, I don't get it. This guy went to Yale, like New York Times bestseller, Harvard, all this. And I'm like, this is not very, I wasn't feeling it. Does that make sense? It was just like college. Like it was just the same stuff I learned, but put in a book. So I was I started off, I'm like, yeah, okay. Communication theory and Socratic seminars, all this stuff is coming back like this is not a thing, like not a profound thing. Then I realized I'm reading his 3 different, buckets that he talks about, the practical conversations versus the emotional conversations. So like prefrontal cortex versus amygdala versus social, just a social conversation, that's not a hot topic. And I was thinking, okay, do I want to be helped? Do I want to hug? Do I want to be heard? Yeah. All of a sudden, it dawns on me that all of the resentment filled communicative interactions that I've had, I'm not going to say in my lifetime, but I'm going to say recently within the past decade and a half, particularly with like school volunteering, have stemmed from this root of me feeling like, oh, maybe I thought I communicated well, but maybe I don't. And really looking at my part and having this realization when I read this that, like, no, actually, I'm in some vortexes that are like, I am generally a super communicator in a world like with school volunteering when I'm around a lot of non-super communicators. And I thought the problem was me. And the problem isn't always me. The problem was that I didn't realize, oh, they're not speaking my language. Like we're on different paths and not one is better than another. It's that they're approaching things from this practical standpoint. And I'm not getting the right bridge, to be able to get my point across because I'm usually coming from an emotional standpoint as well. So I really enjoyed this book after that because I was able to see, man, I got so much room to grow, which is an obvious thing in my life anyway. I have a lot of growth to do and I get to continue being a lifelong learner. But like, this was really poignant in realizing, oh, yep, sometimes, we're not speaking the same dialect. And I thought it was great. I loved it.
Amy, I got excited when you were talking because I lived in Italy and I lived in Germany. And I go back to both of those experiences because we might both think we're saying the same thing. I'm saying it in English, you're saying it in Italian, and we don't realize because we're not speaking the same language. So we're not hearing each other. And that was one of the things that I got excited about as well, is the opportunity to identify, oh, if I said it this way, they would hear me better.
Right.
Or it would be understood. And I will say that I was super excited about this book when I started reading it. Kristin, I will say that I'm not a communicator, but I come from a long line of storytellers. So I do communicate, but there's the over communication versus super communication. And coming from a background where hostage negotiation was in my background and understanding human psychology, I've always leveraged that. But as I was listening to the book and reading the book, because I did both, one of the things that jumped out at me was strengths. My strengths don't necessarily, if you ever done a strengths finder, my strengths don't necessarily lean into super communicator mode always. So there was the self-awareness piece. As I was reading, I was like, oh, yes, this is the way that I operate just on autopilot. And if I want to connect, or if I want to make sure that people hear me in certain situations, whether it's the practical communication, I will say that I grew up with a lot of practical communication versus emotional communication. So just understanding the different kinds of communication, and the example of the gentleman that came in at the beginning of the book and they did the interviews with him and how does he connect? It was a reminder to me, Kristin mentioned this at the beginning, it's an opportunity to listen better, because that listening piece to understand how are they communicating. Like we can think about how are we communicating, but it's the listening part that gives us the cues on how might I approach this differently to actually get my message across. So those were the things I enjoyed.
I think I want to jump in and add just a note about listening, because there are two different ways to listen. One is to listen and literally be listening and trying to understand what the other person is communicating. And the other is listening to respond. I have done both. I'm definitely guilty of listening to respond. But when you're listening to respond, I would argue you're not actually listening at all. And so I think when we're talking about listening, I'm going to just make the assumption or make the clarification that we're talking about actually listening to understand what is being communicated. And one phrase that we use a lot around Work P2P, which is the parent company behind this podcast, is because we have a lot of kind of different language that maybe isn't used in the outside world. And sometimes I understand what someone's saying, sometimes I don't. But what I like to do is let me repeat back what I think I heard you say. That way we can quickly figure out if we're in alignment or not. And a lot of times when I'm communicating with Dan Rogers, my boss, we will laugh and realize, oh no, we have a major disconnect, right? A major disconnect. So that's a little tool that I've learned a while ago, that when you repeat back, let me tell you what I think I heard you say. Not only does it show that you've been actively listening and you're honoring the words of the communicator, but that you're also authentically trying to understand.
I think that's so good, Alysse, because one of the challenges that most of us have is also secret conversations. Like we have it in our heads, or we're like, I shouldn't have to say that. That's really obvious. Or we're approaching a conversation, even though we've played it out like a chess game multiple times before we even broach it with the person in front of us. So we have unintentional shorthand that gets in the way of actually exchanging with people, whether it's facts or whether it's feelings. It becomes a real barrier that we don't always recognize that we're doing. And one of my favorite quotes says, we are drowning in information and starving for wisdom. And I would add on to that, especially in a post-COVID world, we're starving to be heard, to know that somebody out there took the time, the moments to see if what we said matters.
Kristin, that's what I call the manual. I wrote everything you need to know about me in this book, but you haven't read it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have these expectations for how we want people to respond to us. I mean, shouldn't my husband know to not put it in the sink, put it in the dishwasher, and then it's happened 3 times and now I'm pissed off,
Right?
and then I explode. And he's like, wait, I just put the cup in the sink.
So I love this so much. And a lot of this is so much about clarification, right? And I think especially in a marriage relationship or a partnership or a work relationship, like a friendship even, right? We get caught in kind of these dances, right? Like I do this step and then you do this step and then perhaps we get into like the same argument. Like my husband and I can come up with like, oh, it's like, okay, a CD changer or something. If you're Gen X, like I am, like just pull that one up. Let's get that argument on rotation. Like I could tell you the whole thing. And so now it's like, the challenge for me is to take that emotional side of it, right? Take that whole idea of my amygdala firing and just go, wait a minute. You know what I'm trying to do here? I'm trying to dig up this old tape. I'm trying to play it because I'm feeling some fear or an inner need or insecurity or whatever. And I'm expecting you to fill it. And once I kind of get that out of the way, I'm like, you know what? He just wants to know what kind of car we need to rent. That's what there's usually just like this practical thing, right? And if I can get past that emotion of it, how much easier it is to just go, I'm not going to read into this.
Another thing that we do at Work P2P that I've never done at any of the other companies that I've worked at, but I think it's very valuable. We have a PowerPoint presentation that everybody gets during onboarding, and it's a how to work with me. And it's about 5 slides. It's pretty simple. It also has our scores from, I think, a Colby test and maybe one other personality type test. But it's like, this is the best way to work with me. And it answers all kinds of quick things. And there's some funny things on it and there's some serious things on it. But what I love is that everybody all of the employees in our company, and it's not a big company, it's about 20 people, they're all saved in this one place on our SharePoint, right? So if I'm having a struggle with a coworker, and I would highly recommend anybody that leads an events team that's listening to this could be a really good tool for your arsenal, is have everybody on your team fill out this how to work with me and make it whatever you need to make it that works for your team. Because when I'm having a struggle with a team member, a coworker, and I'm like, why are we just not seeing eye to eye on this? The first thing I do is I go back to their how to work with me deck and I'm like, okay, what is on here that I can refresh my brain with so I can work with this person better? And it might be as simply as simple as, oh, Libby loves candy and we're having a breakdown in communication. It's gotten a little heated. So I'm going to soften it up by bringing her some candy or talking about candy just to kind of lighten the mood so we can kind of get into our problem solving of whatever the issue is. Now, that's a really weird example because Libby and I basically never have any issues. We get along perfectly all the time. Never.
No, but it is a great tool because, on there, you can say your strengths, like things that bug you, things that motivate you. And I can look at that and look at somebody's, I don't like people who don't take responsibility for something or something like that. And mine is, I don't like people who blame things on other people or who don't like, that's not the greatest example. So I'll think of a better one. I'll put it in the show notes. But it can really highlight how someone can interpret a situation so differently because like where you would see it as somebody taking one for the team and, being a team player and being like, no, we're all in this together. Like you don't need to call anybody out. Someone else can see that as, well, you don't want to take responsibility for this thing that nobody else needs to really be involved in. It is extremely helpful. So
that is such a brilliant point, Libby, because it goes back to what I said versus what you heard. Right. And that's a yes and. Those are both true in the conversation. And so really having that self-awareness, and that's what super communicators do, to say, this was my intention, and I can recognize this was the impact. And the book talks about, and this goes back to what Dele and Alysse were saying, there's really 3 types of conversations. It's, what's this really about? So for Amy, that was, we just need to rent a car. How do we feel about something, seeking to understand? And then who are we? And those are all examples that we just gave. And without a manual like Dele had or that Work P2P has about ways to work with me, how could people know our books and our manuals if we don't share them first? Which I think brings up such a good point that he made about asking questions.
Yes.
Asking a lot of
Mhm.
deep questions, or, what made you want to go to medical school was something that he was giving as an example, so that you get sort of below that surface and have a better understanding of somebody. I think for me, that really helps give things context. I agree. And it wasn't just asking questions. The book, he said, super communicators ask 10 to 20 times more questions than the average person.
Wow.
Not all at once. I mean, they're not barraging
Rapid fire
An
questions.
interview. This is an interview conversation.
Like Uncle Buck moment.
Keeping that framing that if you feel that you're like staying with that, because there is that opportunity for others to feel heard. And we do edit ourselves. So the questions become more probative to also find out, is this what's it really about? Is this a feelings conversation? Is this so that we can respond in the conversation that's really being had?
Well, and from an events planning perspective, because that's why we're all here, as you're talking, Kristin, I'm thinking about the events where I feel like that was amazing. If I paid for the events. So when I got married and when my daughter got married and when my son got married, we had event planners. The best experiences came from when someone asked a lot of questions. And I remember sitting down with my wedding planner and knowing exactly what vision I had in my head, what experience I wanted to have on the day of my wedding, what experience I wanted to have first and foremost, because I was paying for it. And then what experience did I want my guests to have that would align with that day? And she asked a lot of questions. We sat down for 2 hours. She asked a lot of questions. And I will say that not only did she do it, she nailed it, because the makeup artist said, this is the most relaxed day of prep I've ever experienced in my life. We nailed it. That was my vision. That's what we did. The people who came to the wedding, they had a great time. So it's the asking the questions from an event planning perspective. What questions are we asking to get to not only what are they saying, but what do they mean? That goes back to hostage negotiation. And I never thought I would use that hostage negotiation skill as much as I did when I was working in corporate, because there's, as you said, Kristin, what people are saying and what do they mean? And those are two very different things. So I thought this book was great. Alysse, you probably have some things that you want to ask us or point us in the direction of, so that we don't run too long, because the attention economy is real. But this really was a useful book, regardless of putting together an event or not, just being a better communicator.
If you want to become a super communicator, we host these really great dinners. Go to secretsidekicksuppers.com. We host them about once a month, and they're small. You're at small tables. We have a very specific, we start with a specific guided conversation, but we really just see how it progresses and how it goes and kind of guide the night based on that. But it really is all about asking questions, actively listening, really, I'm emotional, so I love these dinners. It's not like everybody's crying at them, but it is a really great space to practice being vulnerable, being a good listener, and just being a super communicator.
And you could run into one of us.
Yeah.
There's that. Like, that's
And
the
you
cherry on
might
top.
even
If we're
end
keeping it
up-
real.
You might even end up, wait for it, at the fun table. That's right.
Full circle.
Full circle.
There it is.
Well, we are going to wind this conversation down because we know that the only people listening to this podcast are in the event industry, and we know how busy you are. We know that you have limited time. You've got things to do. You've got projects to manage. But before we sign off here for the day, let's score the book, ladies. Is this going in your events library at home? A scale of 1 to 5. Amy Liz Harrison, I will start with you.
Well, I'm going to say it was a 4. I'm going to give it a 4. I thought it was great. I thought there were a lot of things that I hadn't thought about in a long time that are way different today for me that I need to really learn and relearn and open my mind to. And one last final thing about the questions, I was going to say, I loved, Dele, what you shared about the questions, your event planner asking you questions, because sometimes as the person at an event who wants to create it and needs help and is investing in a planner, an event planner, it's like we don't know what we don't know. So sometimes we don't know the information to give that is necessary for an event planner. So I love that she asked you so many questions. 4.5.
Oh, she just took her score up just like that. Wow. Nothing. Everything is fluid here. Dele, what's your score?
Okay, so if I'm rating it on a scale of 1 to 5 for event planners, first I'm going to say if I'm just rating on a scale of 1 to 5, I'm going to give this a solid 4.5. If I'm rating it on a scale of 1 to 5 for people who are in the event space, planning events, I will say that I'm probably going to give it a 3.5. It's great for interpersonal communications so that you understand the different styles of communication. It's helpful for conflict resolution. It's not specifically focused on events planning, logistics. If you're hosting or you're facilitating or moderating an event, then it will help you be better at hosting panels, having those facilitation conversations. So just putting it out there. If you want to be a better communicator, this is a should buy book. You should buy it. It's a great book. Add it to your library. Don't just add it, read it, and then take a couple of the key takeaways and implement them into your communication. Don't just buy the book. High performers have a tendency to collect things. Read it and take 1 or 2 things and add it into what you're going to do.
I don't know anything about buying books and putting them on a bookshelf and never reading them. I don't
Or
know
color
anything
coding
about-
them in the pile that you didn't read yet.
I don't know.
Yeah,
anything
you've
about
never
that.
done that. Never.
Libby, your score, Libby?
I'm going to give it a 4. I found it personally to be a very good read, as in it really made me think about the way I communicate and how probably 99% of my tears or internal dramas because I'm having a different conversation than other people. Will I ever read it again? Probably not, but maybe in 10 years. I also will, to be clear, I will never throw it away or donate it. I mean, it will stay on my bookshelf, coded by author's last name.
Yeah.
But so I think it was very helpful. Yes, maybe not if you're, planning a 2,000 person event, it might not, the things in it might not translate directly to that specific kind of a situation. But, I think it can help anybody in any kind of a workplace, to be honest.
All right. Kristin, take us out here,
Okay.
friend.
I'm going to give it a 4, and that's a nerd 4 because I love me and my books. The reason I'm saying it's across the board 4 is it will validate that there's no one size fits all on how to be a super communicator. I think it can liberate you from ascribing yourself as not good at this. And the other section, which goes back to what Dele said, it's the questions, but ways to ensure that they're being effective. He talks about looping for understanding. That section alone and some of the tips and tactics to try are really helpful of making sure that you're getting out what's in their magical head.
Okay. All right.
And
Alysse,
you?
what about you?
I'm
Alysse, what kind of
Ladies, you know, podcasting with Libby Sundgren is never boring.
So
And the sound effects they just keep coming. They just keep coming.
It's one of the many services she provides.
I'm listening,
Wanted or
Libby.
not.
I'm always listening. I'm always extending grace. Okay, first of all, I got this book on Audible first, and that was a big mistake. It didn't work for me on Audible. So once I got it in my little hand, much better. I think there's a lot of good, meaty information in here. I will give it a solid 4, but aesthetically, I will give it a 4.5 because I appreciate the ombre color scheme going down the front. I find that very pleasing.
Very satisfying.
Very satisfying. And this will go on my library shelf in the white book section.
Wow.
Not by alphabetical letter. I am with Dele. We are the home edit ladies, and we organize by color. Will I highlight in here? Unlikely. Would I refer this book to someone? Probably, depending on the conversation. Also, I would like it to be stated for the record, I bought it in large print because I'm about to turn 50.
Good for you.
I'm about to turn 50, and
So
large
it's
print
accessible.
and readers are where it's at for me. I don't know if any of you noticed at the beginning of this conversation, Libby just slid in the fact that she's basically the youngest one in this group.
Yeah, she
But
totally
she
dropped that way.
totally slid that in. Yeah.
We're going to
wasn't-
keep you anyway.
I wasn't trying
Anyway.
to reveal anything, but if it makes anyone feel better, the second it hit my birthday month last year, I am targeted non-stop, and I'm convinced I've been in perimenopause for 20 years. So, you know, it's a confusing time to be 40. It's a very
I don't
confusing
want to here's what we're going to go out on. Ladies, Drew Barrymore is about to take the cover of the next AARP.
She already did. I got it in the mail.
Okay,
Oh
yeah.
my God.
So that's where we're at.
'Cause I get it.
That's where we're at.
Hey, I just went to a birthday party at a casino, and the 2 birthday girls got a senior citizens discounts. And I'm telling you right now that 50 is the new 30, and I am going to rock it.
I agree.
Okay. All right.
Also,
So-
I would like to start a playlist for the soundtrack that comes up as we're having these conversations. I'm just putting it
a
out
fun
there.
table
That's a really good
playlist.
idea.
Okay. We can do
Because
that.
I'm not
We'll
even
put that
kidding you.
together.
That's a really good
There were
idea.
a lot of songs that were flowing through my little ADHD brain.
Yeah.
All right.
That's going to be a copyright issue right away, but I love it.
It will.
Oh.
We'll go for it. We'll go for it.
It's okay. We don't have to publish it. It's just for me. But I mean,
Yeah.
We'll put
Well,
it on
and for-
Spotify. We'll
put
share it
on
with
Spotify.
anyone.
Yeah.
Music
we'll
Yeah.
put it there.
Quick
your
communicate.
P2P playlist. Yeah.
And for our many listeners and fans at home, if there is a hot topic you would like us to discuss at the fun table, or a book that you think we should review, or an event we should go to, we want to hear from you. We definitely want to hear your trials and errors of what happens behind the scenes of events, because that's kind of our favorite. But until the next time, we hope that you are finding ways at winning the game of events, and we will see you next time here at Beats Working.
Thanks for listening to Beats Working, Winning the Game of Events, where we explore what it takes to make moments unforgettable.
If you're leaving with a little more inspiration, a little more perspective, and a big side ache from all of the laughing at our funny jokes, then we've done our job.
Beats Working is a Work P2P production. If you've enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platforms.
Your support helps us keep the magic going.